media. I want to take a moment to situate my research in what we heard in yesterday's opening remarks, the dialectical relationship between knowledge and community. So this study explores the role of Muslim women as producers of embodied knowledge. The paper examines how Muslim women, particularly in digital spaces, are negotiating Islamic ethics through peer-to-peer reasoning and engaging in dialogue centering dilemmas such as migration, marriage, divorce, reproductive decisions, financial responsibility, and parenting. My core argument is that in these forums, women are not just seeking support. They are spaces where women collaboratively produce vernacular fiqh, a form of informal Islamic ethical reasoning, a collective experience-based production of jurisprudence that arises from communal reasoning and lived experience. While this jurisprudence is also shaped by platform governance, moderation norms, and algorithmic visibility. So why does this matter? The rise of digital media has profoundly altered the landscape of Islamic religious authority. In this sense, Islamic advice groups are not merely religious spaces, but algorithmically structured moral and affective counterpublics that shape how piety, duty, and justice are articulated. The discourse space operates as micropolitics, where individual disclosures build into collective empowerment. Across these platforms, women are asking deeply personal and ethical questions, such as how do I interpret abandonment and emotional neglect Islamically? What counts as coercion in marriage? Is civil divorce Islamically acceptable in diasporic contexts? What are the ethical boundaries of fertility, technologies like IVF, or surrogacy? What do I do when my child's school practices conflict with my values? What is important that these discussions are not only about women sharing stories. Women are actively producing moral reasoning. They're drawing on Quranic language, prophetic teaching, legal categories, and community memory. Through these interactions, women articulate a dynamic community-based understanding of Islamic ethics, one shaped by emotion, scripture, platform affordances, and collective deliberation. Through this organically occurring crisis and teaching moments, women transform into active producers of knowledge from being passive recipients of religious instruction. So my research question is looking at how do Muslim women negotiate Islamic ethics and moral authority in women's-only digital advice forums shaped by platform mediation. And I have a few sub-questions to explore my central question. What forms of authority emerge when women advise one another without a formal scholar being present? How do women name harm, coercion, fairness, consent, and piety? And importantly, how do platform dynamics like moderation rule, engagement incentives, and algorithmic visibility shape what becomes acceptable ethical discourse? So I'm not only asking what women say, but also how the platform environment structures what can be said and what becomes dominant. So in terms of method, I did a qualitative digital ethnography, exploring 3 Facebook women-led groups for Muslim women, and I selected 20 high engagement threads with 612 comments, and the analysis focuses on those 612 comments. And these threads were chosen because of the recurring dilemmas discussed in these spaces, such as abandonment in marriage, divorce in Islamic legal processes, reproductive dilemmas, financial maintenance and income sharing, parenting concerns, modesty and spousal control. And I use open coding, axial categorization, and interpretive synthesis. And I position myself as an insider-outsider as a member of these spaces, which provides cultural and interpretive fluency for my research, but I also approach the data set analytically, focusing on patterns rather than individuals. So the key concepts that frames my research. The first one is vernacular fiqh. It describes a form of Islamic ethical reasoning that is decentralized, experiential, peer-produced, grounded in lived consequences rather than formal legal rulings. It is also deeply Islamic in its vocabulary and moral orientation, but it is produced through community deliberation rather than clerical authority. And the second concept to ground the study is platform mediation in AI-shaped environments. When I say AI-mediated, I'm referring to how digital environments are structured by engagement ranking, algorithmic visibility, recommendation systems, moderation policies, and enforcement. So these systems influence which dilemmas become more visible, which moral interpretations become dominant, and how authority circulates. So rather than treating the platform as a neutral container, the paper treats it as an active moral infrastructure. So the first finding is that these forums function as crowdsourced fixed spaces grounded in communal counter narratives and legal literacy infrastructures. Women come to these groups with a sense of ontological dislocation, a perceived collapse of moral order through which one's life has been structured. The crisis moments that women articulate in these spaces are therefore not only interpersonal, they are existential. Women express forms of vulnerability that would be difficult or socially objectionable to share offline. So, for example, in surrogacy and fertility-related threads, women ask questions such as, would you marry a man with known fertility issues? When should you disclose PCOS if you have PCOS? What about surrogacy with your own gametes if IVF fails? And women, the commenters, the feedback providers, they respond in two main registers: personal and experiential. They share their own personal experiences, and normative and Islamic quotes and comments grounded in Quranic teaching and prophetic anecdotes. So even without a scholar being present in these spaces, women map moral boundaries through community reasoning. The kul and fesek related threads also make these quasi-legal function more visible. A woman, for example, described abandonment, refusal of Islamic divorce, and avoidance of mahr and property division in one of her posts. She can secure a civil divorce, but she's worried if it will count Islamically. And these are very salient issues in diasporic contexts where Muslims are in the minority. So to this crisis moment, other women responded by mobilizing competing legal discourses. Some argued that civil divorce is valid Islamically in that context. Others insist on Islamic procedure and recommend Muslim councils. Some provide detailed explanation of fasaq grounds, which are abandonment, failure to provide, abuse, deception, and multiple commenters advise seeking both a lawyer and an imam who are understanding of specific abuse contexts. So the group becomes a space where Islamic terms like kul, fasaq, and mahr become tools of practical navigation. The second finding about coercion, piety, and power in marriage. In a niqab pressure thread, which I categorized into coercion and piety, a woman describes her husband becoming increasingly insistent on her wearing a niqab after moving from France to the UK. She describes real stress, exhaustion, and reluctance to make a promise to her spouse that she can't keep up with. We see that commenters in this scenario revealing divergent moral interpretations. Many women label this behavior from the woman's spouse as being controlling and abusive. They argue that worship cannot be coerced and niqab is not a fard, according to some of their interpretations. Others take an affective approach, emphasizing that modesty should not be suffocating or fear-driven. But there are also women who interpret the husband's insistence as protective jealousy or masculinity or his right. They encourage her to consider his feelings or even relocate to a Muslim majority country.
5 minutes.
This is analytically important. So the same behavior, spousal pressure, becomes legible as either moral leadership or coercive control. The divorce-related threads that I looked at also expand on this finding. Women widely recognize abandonment and refusal to release mahr, for example, as emotional and economic abuse. These threads show that the forum functions as a space where women test, does what I am experiencing count as abuse? And these teaching and crisis moments usher into a community where the community is driven to find remedies or courses of action. I'm going to go through the findings really quickly because we are short on time. So the third finding is about finance and income sharing agreements between spouses. A woman described, for example, household expenses and savings divisions, and questions fairness when she contributes a large share of her income while her husband claims Islamically he does not need to disclose his income or even provide bare minimum. The comments showed doctrinal and pragmatic reasoning from the commenters. Some insist that nafaka, financial maintenance, is primarily the husband's responsibility, and expecting equal contribution is inherently unjust even if the wife earns. So we can see that these types of threads demonstrate how religious discourse intersects with economic power. The fourth finding concerns reproductive ethics and cultural surveillance. In pregnancy timing threats, for example, women ask whether it is acceptable to conceive soon after nikah, but before public ceremony. Commenters, again, repeatedly disentangle Islamic permissibility from cultural policing. They urge women to resist shame-based judgments and prioritize divine accountability over community optics. The fifth finding extends ethical negotiation into children's schooling. In one of the threads, a mother describes her child being asked to perform a content that conflicts with her religious values at his school, so she's unsure about what to do. And responses offer a spectrum of strategies. Some suggest treating it as cultural exposure rather than endorsement. Others recommend opting out and communicating clearly about religious environments respectfully while maintaining identity clarity. So to synthesize, a key empirical insight is that the comment section themselves are not just supportive, they are sites of authority production. Women do the emotional labor of making dua. They provide sources grounded in Quranic ayahs, interpretation, prophetic teaching. They affirm dignity. They normalize coexistence with distress and empowering experiences and encourage action, but authority is contested. They reproduce hierarchies. Who is visible in these groups? English fluency and writing style privilege, class sensibilities about reasonable emotion, digital literacy and confidence with Islamic vocabulary, and norms of respectability that shape whose voice carries authority. So moderation plays a crucial role. Anti-judgment norms protect vulnerable women, but can also constrain doctrinal disagreement or silence stricter voices. So moral policing exists, but it is frequently met with counter-policing, and platform mediation intensifies these dynamics. AI-shaped visibility systems, ranking and engagement shape which dilemmas become collective priorities and which interpretations appear dominant. Depends on how many likes you're getting. That will show up on your screen. So the platform does not simply host Islamic ethical reasoning, it actively structures it. To conclude, this paper shows that women-only digital forums are central sites of contemporary Islamic ethical formation. They generate vernacular fiqh, peer-based Islamic reasoning grounded in lived experience, practical action, and moral deliberation across threads. Women repeatedly interpret coercion, whether about nikah, finance, or reproductive decisions, or divorce, as ethically illegitimate and inconsistent with Islamic principles of mercy, mutuality, and non-harm. These spaces also function as third spaces where women can articulate dilemmas that would be difficult to speak openly about offline. Yet the study also complicates the idealized narrative of digital egalitarianism. These spaces reproduce hierarchies and are shaped by moderation politics and platform visibility logics. The broader contribution is that Islamic moral authority is not only produced in institutions, it is increasingly being produced through everyday peer deliberation in AI-mediated digital environments. And these forums show Muslim women actively reauthoring Islamic ethical life grounded in dignity, consent, divine-centered accountability within the constraints and possibilities of platform politics publics. Thank you.
15 minutes and 7 seconds, if anyone is wondering. Mashallah. Thank you, Sarzah, for your interesting